Welcome back to the Podecito podcast. I'm your host, Surreal469. Thank you for coming along with me as we go through this journey of our collective favorite show. Of course, I'm talking about the incomparable Las Vegas. We are on episode 13 of the series and of the season. And what better way to deal with the unluckiest number in the numerology, I'm guessing, because of all the instances it comes up, than with an unlucky episode. I, of course, am talking about the night the lights went out in Vegas. This episode paraphrases its title from secondarily a speech given on an episode of Designing Women that aired October 6, 1986, and primarily from the Vicki Lawrence song that was written with her ex-husband back in November or October of 1972 and released in November of 1972 called The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia. Both of those are worth a listen and a watch, especially the design. The song is great, actually. It's a really well-written song. And the speech that Julia Sugarbaker, the incomparable Julia Sugarbaker, gives in that episode of Designing Women is so legendary, it's still recited today. The episode itself debuted January 26th, 2004. It was supposed to actually air in December, according to Gary Scott Thompson himself on the DVD commentary track, which is one of the sources of information for the podcast, obviously, and for this episode. It was written by Gary Scott Thompson. This episode was directed by Craig Zisk. Zist. That's quite the name. Has directed a long litany of things. He started with Brooklyn Bridge back in 1993. He also did an episode of Love Boat: The Next Wave, which means that he is familiar with a show like this, because as I've said quite a few times, Las Vegas reminds me a lot of The Love Boat, except this episode. The way it reminds me of it is that we get guest stars and stuff like that. We don't this episode, not the way we usually do. He also, some years later, in 2004 actually, did an episode of Dr. Vegas with Rob Lowe, Joey Pants, Tom Sizemore, and Sarah Lancaster. I gotta check out this show. It keeps coming up in people's bios. He also did 3 episodes of our collective favorite show, Las Vegas. This is his first. He also did the season 2 episode, Have You Seen the Rain? Powerful episode. And season 3, Mothwoman. That one is going to bring a smile to a lot of listeners' faces because you don't like the subject of Mothwoman, do you? No, you do not. The last directorial credit he has is for Tulsa King, the Sylvester Stallone show. He did 4 episodes of that so far, and the last one was this year. That is director Craig Zisk. This episode is packed full of information because aside from the normal places where I get my information from, whatever internet I can find, whatever scraps of information I can find anywhere else, we also get DVD commentary on this one, just like we did for the last episode, Hellraisers and Heartbreakers. This DVD commentary we get from GST himself and Vanessa Marcil. A whole bunch we learn here. First and foremost, this is a bottle episode, and you will figure that out when we get to that, when we actually get to who we see in the casino itself. I will say this. This episode was a favorite of the cast and crew. They apparently love not only doing this episode, but rewatching it. It's likely to be one of the ones that if any of them pull out their old DVD sets or catch it on Cozy or wherever they catch it on, if this one pops up, they'll probably stop and rewatch it because they love it so much. And I understand why. This one is a tremendous episode. With the DVD commentary, we get a lot of tidbits from Vanessa and Gary Scott Thompson. For instance, when Vanessa auditioned for the role, she wasn't nervous at all. And apparently she normally is, or at least was at that time period, but she wasn't because she was dealing with issues with her son at home. And so she didn't have time. Real world stuff got in the way of her being nervous or psyching herself up to the point of being nervous for the audition. And when she got into the room for the audition, the room was so light, the room was so everyone was laughing at everything, and it was so fun that by the time she left, she was actually hoping that she did get the role. And then when Gary Scott Thompson called her and told her that she got the role, she cried because she was so happy that she got it. But even if she hadn't have got it, she said that it wouldn't have been that big of a, or it wouldn't have been a total loss, because in the waiting area, she met Marsha Thomason and clicked with her immediately and said, even if I don't get this, I clicked with this girl so well, I at least made a friend today. Also, a note about Vanessa's audition. Apparently, she read the scene with Josh where Sam negotiates her wages of staying in the hotel and how long the contract will be, etc. And also read the scene where she gets mixed up for Jane, or she is assumed to be Jane instead of Samantha Jane Marquez. So those are the scenes that she wrote, and it worked so well that she is now in the episode. This episode, according to Gary Scott Thompson, the writer of it, is supposed to take place in real time. So it's supposed to be in a set, the block of 44 minutes, that all this is happening. It's not concurrent with each other. It's everything is happening in real time. So if you watch it all the way through, that's how long this whole thing has happened. Let's get to the episode, shall we? We open with a shot of the Vegas Strip, and everything is buzzing, lights are everywhere, and we cut into the casino, and we see different people on the monitors. As we do this, we start with a musical cue, one of only two in this episode. The first musical cue that we hear as we open, if you're watching the original version. And how did you get the original version, Surreal? I didn't get the original version. But if you're watching on the original version, you're going to hear Fly Me to the Moon by Tom Jones. Tom Jones's version of Fly Me to the Moon. If you're watching on DVD, you're going to hear a song called The Magic of You, parentheses, from Masters of Sex, episode 207, by Joel Evans. That's the way it's labeled, apparently, because they also use the song for Masters of Sex. However, I first heard it on the DVD. And so you can put From Masters of Sex, obviously, because it's probably a more searchable title than just plain Las Vegas to find it and make plays and stuff like that. But if you're going to listen to it and add it to your Las Vegas soundtrack or playlist, which you can, it's a good song. It's not as good as Tom Jones's Fly Me to the Moon, but it's a good song nonetheless. That's what you'll be looking for. And if you're watching on Peacock or Amazon, you hear a production song. And this production song is terrible. It is terrible. It is awful. It's about finding love in the moonbeams, and I am now convinced that on streaming, when they don't have or don't want to get or decide, screw the rights to a particular song, I'm convinced that they use AI. I'm convinced that these are AI generated songs, because this song is, it's not great. It's not great, and it can be done on the cheap, and you don't have to pay anybody, and it doesn't have to be registered anywhere, so it doesn't have to get found anywhere, and it belongs to no one, and you can use it. I think that, I'm convinced now, because we've seen this a couple of times in the last few episodes, where the songs, I'm hearing them, and they're so poorly written and done that they couldn't even be production songs. Production songs used to fit in that slot where, maybe it wasn't the best song ever, but it was good enough to fill the space that it was playing at the time if you didn't pay close enough attention. Now, it's worse than that. Now, you don't even have to pay attention, and you can tell that these lyrics suck. They're terrible, and the music itself isn't great, and everything it ends too perfectly. And I know, but Surreal, they edit the music and put it in where they want to so that it ends where it wants to and begins where it wants to. Yeah, but this feels fake. This feels artificial. This feels like they artificially did it. This feels like they had the block of 47 seconds at the beginning and 47 seconds at the end to play it, and it fits that 47 seconds perfectly, or 94 seconds perfectly, and they just chop it in half at the beginning of it. It feels like a mechanic. It feels fake to me. All right, let's talk about these people for a second. We see one person stand up. We see a couple of monitors with a few other people. Some of these are going to be more important to the story than others. Some aren't going to be important to the story at all. You're never going to, like, you'll see them all. You'll see them all multiple times. All of them are going to get camera time. But you won't care about most of them. We pan out from the monitors, which look great, by the way, to surveillance, and we see Mitch almost do a wheelie in his chair as he's spinning around, completely bored. You have Ed in surveillance with Mitch, and one other person who's in the background who also never talks. That's going to come up. We see him. He's barely noticeable. He's barely in there, only because it would be somehow less realistic for there to be only 2 people in surveillance at this point. So they put somebody in a suit and they put him in surveillance. And Ed pulls Mike up to surveillance because he needs somebody to talk to. And this is one of my favorite scenes for Mitch, because this brings Mitch into the fold. Mitch gets to do other things and just say, checking on camera 20, checking on camera 24. This is one of the first real times that we get to see Mitch's personality, and it's great. And it's going to flourish and blossom in amazing ways in another, is it 2 seasons? I think it's 2 seasons when that happens, 2 or 3. It's a couple of seasons. But this is the first real blossoming of Mitch's personality. Him and Ed go back and forth, yanking each other's chains, and it's cool. And Mike starts to tell Ed why he's not at the David Copperfield show. David Copperfield is the reason why there's nobody in the casino, or barely anybody in the casino tonight, because David Copperfield is doing a trick where he is allegedly going to make the Hoover Dam disappear. So everyone is on Lake Mead to watch that performance, and no one is in the casino gambling. Not a whole lot of people are in the casino gambling. I don't know that Lake Mead can hold everybody in Vegas, except for the few people that are there. Mike starts bringing up the full moon thing, and he starts saying that there are more crimes committed on a full moon than any other time of the month. Mike is wrong. There is no evidence to suggest that. Ed says Mike is wrong. There's no evidence to suggest that because there isn't any. And then Mike says this phrase, which, if you Google it, is only attributed to Mike Cannon. It is nowhere else. He makes this thing up entirely out of whole cloth. Mike, tell him about bewaring the moon, please.
Beware the full moon and its light. People will party and incite. Dogs who never did suddenly bite. Murderers will kill this very night.
And Ed is, I don't know how unbored he is, but Mike is sounding a bit like a lunatic. Oh, wait.
Lunatic. After Luna, which is Latin for moon. Mitch is getting it.
Mitch is getting it, yes. Yes, he is. Ed, I think, is basically tired. He misses the phone call from Mitch as opposed to getting it himself. Mike isn't at the show because magicians give him the willies. So that's a nugget that we just learned about Mike. He's not a big fan of magicians in Vegas. Okay. But realistically, he just doesn't want to deal with people on a full moon in Vegas. Not necessarily enough to stay home. Meanwhile, Mitch lets everyone know that a guy says he escaped from Area 51 and he wants to talk to the head alien in charge. I wonder what'll happen with that guy. So we whoosh down to the casino floor and we see Nessa with Danny. And Danny is getting flirted with by the lovely, darling Marsha Thomason, a.k.a. Nessa Holt. And this guy, with the women flocking all over him, oh my God. So she's flirting with him a little bit. And one thing I will note is, if you watch, remember how I talked about in the last episode, the background being dimmed a bit? You can see it again here. There's more, you can still see parts of it where the lights are out. So Danny has been notified about the man from Area 51 who is coming to check the head alien in charge. That ends the conversation with Nessa, who Danny tells that...
You know, Nessa, Full moon's always the best time to take in the sights of Vegas.
Oh, promises.
Danny passes a beautiful young woman who winks at him. Pay attention to her. We're going to be seeing her a bit. Actually, we'll talk about her now because we're already here. We might as well. That beautiful young lady is played by Krista Sauls. Krista Sauls has a very short IMDb. She got her first credit in 1994 as Maria in California Dreams for an episode. She did a little over a handful of things before she did this show, Las Vegas, as Sexy Woman. The last thing you could see her in from an IMDb standpoint is Killing Cupid as Starfish in 2005. The things that she did do are stuff like Silk Stockings, Acapulco Heat, the sultry cable shows. That was her wheelhouse for better part of a decade or so. So she winks at Danny because don't you know that Danny is the sexiest man of all sexiest men? No other sexy men could possibly live up to the sexiness that is Danny McCoy. And all the women in all the land, the sexiest of all the lands, you see, Las Vegas, know that he is the sexiest man in the sexiest land with all the sexiest women in all the sexiest land. So they cannot resist this young man at all. Again, if it wasn't for the fact that this was a television, I would reach on through and not resist him myself. He's the sexiest. Anyway, he's going to be joined by Mary, a.k.a. Nikki Cox, who has to run to catch up with this one-legged man because his bounds through the casino on his crutches essentially make him almost like a horse. Like, remember in the last episode, we had the whoosh like a horse? So Mary is meeting with him, and they tell a joke about David Copperfield, and we're met with Sam. Sam is exhausted. She spent 2 days straight with the Resnick brothers. The Resnick brothers is a name drop from Gary Scott Thompson. Those are Gary Scott Thompson's nephews, the Resnick brothers. Mary and Sam and Danny spend a couple of minutes here just talking about how much that they hate the Resnick brothers. They always stop for potty breaks. They play for 48 hours straight. Sam is so exhausted she almost thought the Resnick brothers were cute. So basically they're just calling the Resnick brothers ugly. Sam says that they play and they fly back to their vineyards in Redwood Valley. Redwood Valley is another drop from Gary Scott Thompson. Redwood Valley is his hometown in California, which is up near Northern California, up by Eureka, or not like in between like Eureka and some other valley. It's up north. It's not LA. You can tell. So when she said that she thought that the Resnick brothers were cute, she's also giving us a little bit of a cue about the rest of the episode. She says,
and on top of all of that, I think I'm starting to hallucinate the Resnick brothers started to look cute to me.
Did you hear it? Did you hear it? Sam asks Danny to massage her feet. And Danny says he absolutely won't. Now, mind you, this is not too long after, what was it, an episode or two, when Danny was asking Sam to scratch his foot that was in the walking boot. And so Mary is still having to bound to catch up with Danny, and she wants to talk about us. Dun, dun, dun. And we see a man in a suit walking past Sam. Keep him in mind. We can't stop on all the people. Sam meets up with Nessa, who asks why he's not at the Copperfield show, and Sam says that she doesn't want to be out with the full moon either. So she also believes in the full moon thing the same way Mike does. She believes that it'll create craziness. Keep that in mind. And then we see some streakers. We see some streakers coming through, and we don't get to see their faces. Luckily, we don't necessarily get to see anything else. And then Sam says that...
Anyway, David doesn't like me around ever since I dumped him.
You and Copperfield.
What do you think taught him how to blow dry his hair like that?
Now, this bit is interesting because David Copperfield apparently watched the show. Not only does he watch the show, here's how they found out. He sent flowers to Gary Scott Thompson and Vanessa Marcil after this episode. Apparently, the flowers that he sent to Vanessa had a card on it that reads, "Had a great time working with you," from David. And the one he sent to Gary Scott Thompson was, "Thanks for including me in your show," signed, "David, please call." Now, neither of them, I guess, initially thought it was David Copperfield. And apparently, Gary Scott Thompson, as of the recording of the DVD commentary track, was trying to work something out with David Copperfield to come onto the show. Maybe there's a scheduling thing or something like that that prevented that from happening. But it's not like David Copperfield was opposed to it. David Copperfield did a very quick cut, like a very quick cut scene. One of the wipe away flashbacks, cutaways that they did on the show Scrubs.
So I'm guessing this is just about the greatest moment of your life, huh there, newbie?
Holy crap, it's David Copperfield.
Well, definitely top 2.
What's that I see in your ear? Fazal.
Cool, a coin.
Do you want it?
You take it.
Oh, magic! No, top 3.
Oh, God.
It's a very funny bit on a very funny and amazing show. Find it if you can. Original copies if you can. DVDs if you must. Don't do streaming for Scrubs. Don't do streaming for Scrubs. This is a slight tangent. Don't do streaming. As you remember as I'm talking about the musical cues here on Las Vegas, it is as important as it is on a certain number of episodes. It is vitally important to Scrubs to hear the original music and the original placement. So, as much as I love Scrubs, and as much as you'll get a significant portion of the content by streaming it, it's better if you get the original version, and if you must, the DVD, because they make, again, minimal changes. Side tangent. But David Copperfield, it would have been up to doing it. In the meanwhile, Nessa is just flabbergasted, but not really, because it totally makes sense. So then we cut to Mary and Danny at the elevator bay, and Mary is looking for answers. She has been getting mixed messages lately from Danny, and she wants a clear answer from our boy Danny McCoy. And she deserves it. So we cut back to the casino and we see that man in this casual suit, had the no collar shirt on initially, but he's passed by another man who's carrying a sweater. He's got a vest on. He is very interesting looking. And he is passed by another man who is slightly menacing looking, but also slightly kind of stone-faced looking, and they're just kind of walking around each other because you're supposed to note them in your brain as you continue to watch. Nessa and Sam are met by Delinda, and Delinda asks if she still has time to go down to Lake Mead because she got personally invited as a guest of David Copperfield's to watch the show tonight. And Sam tells Delinda that...
Let's just say I, christened his houseboat.
Oh, you nasty girl.
Mary says she's going to go with Danny to his trip that he's got to go get the Area 51 man. So, essentially, she's asking this in a very tight window because once Danny gets off his elevator and starts dealing with Area 51 man, he is going to bolt and try to leave and try to avoid again. So Mary tells Danny that she heard that Danny was sleeping with Sam one episode ago. And by the way, do you remember last episode when I told you that Mary saw Danny leaving the Belisara with Sam? We saw her see them. We saw it with our own lying eyes. We saw it. So Danny says that he didn't sleep with Sam. Again, that's not what Mary heard. They're joined by a small smiling man. We're joined back on the floor by the shadow and now the actual placement of a gun. And we get a whoosh around it. And we see Nessa and Sam and Delinda and that guy again with the casual suit on. And they can see that there's a gun in surveillance. It's just a shot of the gun. Gary Scott Thompson said that this was a throwback to old 30s thrillers and mysteries. Now, here's the thing, though. Surveillance can see the gun in the hand, but because they're zoomed in on the gun. Why aren't they zoomed in on the person holding the gun? Why are they only zoomed in on the gun? Now, if you're watching the hand on the gun, you can't really tell. It could be a man's hand. It could be a woman's hand. There's no bracelets or rings or anything on that hand. It's indistinct Caucasian hand all you can really tell is that it's a slim figure. Like, you might really kind of, it's this kind of slim sort of build to a wrist and hand there. But why are they only zoomed in on the gun? Why would that be? Well, it's because the show has to happen. That's why. So Ed knows that there's a gun on the floor, and they're about to try to get security all the way down there. And then all of a sudden, as Ed's about to go down, everything stops. The elevator stops as Danny is about to get grilled by Mary. And lights go out in surveillance. And lights go out everywhere, all the way down the strip. And the last thing to go down is the light at Luxor. Gary Scott Thompson said he had a ball in effects, working with the guys to make all that happen. And you could see, if you're watching on DVD, each frame where, and I guess maybe streaming, but some streaming control, like, don't bother doing this with Peacock's streaming controls. They're terrible with the rewind, and if you rewind and press play again too fast, you might as well just restart the whole thing. So DVD is probably better, but you can see each frame where it blacks out, and Gary Scott Thompson was particularly proud of that. And we shoot to the intro. By the way, it's on the DVD commentary that we learn for the first time that Gary Scott Thompson actually wanted the intro to be Viva Las Vegas by Linkin Park, which would have been an interesting, and apparently Josh Duhamel was looking all over the place for that particular version of that particular song, which means that back then, that means that Josh Duhamel was all over, it was 2003. Had we moved past, I guess we were still on, Napster was dead. We had moved to LimeWire. I think we were still on LimeWire. I don't think we were on Kazaa yet, or we were just turning into Kazaa. We certainly weren't on BearShare yet. I think we were on Kazaa. He was probably searching all over Kazaa looking for that, because I'm sure he wasn't looking through like anybody in any kind of entertainment industry. I'm sure he were asking any actual musicians. I'm sure he, like all the rest of us in 2003, was probably on, I guess, Kazaa. It had to have been Kazaa, right? I think it was Kazaa. So when we come back, we see the streets of Vegas. However, traffic is still moving. That's the one thing. Traffic doesn't stop. And it would stop because of all the lights are out, all the traffic lights are out, traffic would stop. But it doesn't stop here. There aren't, here crashes in the background. Traffic didn't stop. But you see some, and what they do is they bring up a small hint of like small emergency lights on the casinos as they all went down, right? Or as they come back from the break. And we're in surveillance right now. And apparently this was a very hard scene for them to figure out how to light when they were doing it, because initially it was too dark, and then they figured out how to do it with some backlighting and different stuff like this. Now, why is all this happening, you may be asking? This is a bottle episode. A bottle episode is when a TV show, it has to or chooses to, depends on the show, depends on the circumstance, condense their storytelling. Have to or chooses to make a more in-depth, character-driven show, as opposed to using any other gimmick that TV shows use. Special guests, extra music, fire trucks, fireworks, explosions, all, they condense it all down. It's usually the usual trope, at least the old trope was, you get characters stuck in some place. And these characters are stuck in different places in the casino. But usually what it is like, one of the famous examples is Archie and Meathead stuck in Archie's meat locker at his bar or whatever. I think it was his bar. I think it was Archie Bunker. I think it was his bar. Whatever. They were stuck in a locker somewhere, or locked like a. I don't even think it might have been like a basement. They were stuck in a basement, and they couldn't get out. The lock was jammed. They couldn't get out. They were stuck there, and the entire episode was them there. Another bottle episode, more recent, still not new, but in the 90s, was the Mad About You episode, where they try to train their daughter to wean off understanding that if she cries, they will come automatically. So they go in as soon as she cries, and they go in every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 20 minutes, and you're watching that in real time on the show. It's one continuous shot of the hallway. This was a special episode too. Like they made it a whole big thing because they had a sponsor do bookends of that episode. I remember this. I remember watching this because it was supposed to be a very special episode. I'm a TV nerd. And what it was it really was just a glorified bottle episode because they didn't go anywhere else. There weren't any other guest cast members. It was just them there, and we watched them for 22 minutes. Let's let the dealer shuffle the deck for a second, and we'll be right back.
Okay, I'm your amigo. Okay, I'm your amiga. Let's dance the night away until our bodies got fever.
You're listening to Bundeswing by 1989 TRE. If you like what you're hearing and you want to hear more, hear it again, or both, just go to Spotify and search 1989 TRE, all one word. That's 1989, the letters TRE.
More drinks, tequila, more memories needed. We're gonna live in the moment, como esta noche para siempre. My life is crazy, just like a movie scene. I've been so many places and seen beautiful things, but my mind is captured by this beautiful queen whose dances got me.
And that's what this episode. Now, this episode was because they were already over budget at this point in the season, and according to Garrett Scott Thompson, they had to, quote, stop the bleeding somehow. So remember, again, when I was talking about the lights in all the previous episodes, and even earlier in this episode, the reason why they did it that way, I'm sure, why they didn't backlight some stuff, there are a whole bunch of reasons. The set was being built still, and we'll see that come back in a minute. That's why they kept using that hallway. And so they were needing to build the whole set for the whole crew, for the whole show. So that takes money. And they have to take money away from certain things, which is other parts of the production. Right? So they don't. And when you don't, and you get a series order for, what do they do, 22 or 24 episodes of the first season, and you're over budget by episode 12, you gotta do some stuff. Which is why this episode only has 2 musical cues, in part, because they didn't want to pay for any more musical cues. So and really, when we get to it, I'll spoil it right here. At the end of it, the musical cue is the same musical cue at the end as in the beginning. Now, what bottle episodes do, and I love bottle episodes. Bottle episodes are great. And you're going to see that here. We're going to get character development all over the place in this episode. And that's what they're good for. They're great for character development. Oftentimes, especially in sitcoms, you get the 2 characters that hate each other and they're stuck in a spot in an elevator or something like that. And they have to work out their differences, and they have the big fight, and they work out their differences, and at the end, everything's okay. And because it's a sitcom, by the time you get to the next episode, they're fighting again. But bottle episodes are very good for writers because it allows them to tap into the artistic side of writing. Sometimes you want a wide canvas with as few rules as possible. Sometimes it's fun to play within a sandbox with rules, with restrictions, and figure out how to get the best out of that circumstance with those restrictions. And that's one of the reasons why I love bottle episodes. That's one of the reasons why I like this particular bottle episode. We cut back to surveillance, and Ed is just incredibly upset. We see Mike running past Ed and Mitch in surveillance. The other guy in surveillance isn't moving, again, isn't saying anything, and by this point, you probably wouldn't even remember that he exists. Meanwhile, Mike is trying to shoulder his way out of the door. We get into the elevator, and we get to see the smiling man, and we get to see Danny, and they are super stuck. But we get one camera back. We get one camera up, and thanks to auxiliary power. Now, auxiliary power is... The short version of auxiliary power is it's the same thing that makes it so that even though your car is off, you can hit the button and hear the click click for the alarm. They have that for the casino. The backup generators didn't start, but they have that for the casino. So everybody's stuck wherever they are. There's no cell service. The Nextel pagers are down. The phone service is down. Now, here's the thing about that. For you kids that don't remember anything about landlines, because Mitch said that the house phones are down as well. So they're on Nextels. Do you remember? You probably don't remember the Nextel pagers. They're on the chirps. Where you at? So I just looked it up because I didn't have a chirp phone. And yes, chirp phones worked on cell towers. So they had the old Nextels. So if the old Nextels, do you remember? You probably don't. Oh, if you're too young to remember the Nextel chirp phones. But they had the chirp phones. that chirped every time you turn them on and off, which is what made them incredibly annoying, which is why every kid, almost every kid, a lot of kids had them, and they were super, super annoying. But those are down. And the house phones in the hotel are down. So do those work on a cell tower in 2003? Probably not. The reason I'm saying this is because traditional landline phone service over a copper network can work without power, without the typical electrical grid working, because they're not on the same thing. Right? So back in the day, you could cut off the phone, or you could cut off the electricity and still have the phone. Unless it was a, not portable phone, but a cordless phone, because it still had to charge at some point, and if the cordless phone wasn't on the base and charging, but yeah. So that's curious to me. But the show has to continue. Danny is assessing the situation while they're in the elevator, being Ever the Marine, and Mike is freaking out. He is banging on the door. Ed is trying to work with Mitch. And again, the other guy, nowhere to be found. The other guy, just in the background. He's probably, if he's asleep, Ed's not waking him up. The other guy, entirely useless. And you don't even see him. You don't even see him. Did he leave? Did he leave the scene and I didn't notice? Hold on. Nope, I just checked. He's still there. He was in surveillance when the lights went out. So he doesn't move. He doesn't say anything. I don't even know if we ever see him on camera again, but he's in surveillance somehow. Okay. Anyway, we cut to the casino floor. You're not supposed to take this episode particularly seriously because this is a very fun episode. We cut to the casino floor and we see our girls that are on the floor hovering over the dead body while the other constituents are hovering over them. Now, this is a very cool angle with very cool lighting, and we get to see, and we kind of get to subconsciously put in our heads the idea of which one of these people that we saw is a suspect, especially if you've seen any other whodunits in your time. There's one woman, the blonde woman over to the left of your screen, who's lit particularly in a way and is looking down particularly in a way that you almost would think that she killed this guy. But that's did she? Do we know if she did? I don't know. They're trying to assess the situation too, are the girls. And Delinda says somebody in this room killed him. And we start to see Sam starting to freak out. As soon as Delinda says that, Sam pops up and says,
Somebody in this room killed him, Nessa.
I know.
You mean there's a killer among us?
Now, this episode was written specifically for Vanessa Marcil in mind, according to Gary Scott Thompson, and there's a reason for that. Apparently, when the concept was conceived, Gary Scott went over to Vanessa and asked, hey, can you play a slightly paranoid schizophrenic? And Vanessa said, I am a slightly paranoid schizophrenic. And we start to see Sam's breakdown here, immediately right here. And if you watch this, you can see her face change as she sees the dead body. And it's a good bit of acting. It is a damn good bit of acting. And her reaction breeds other reactions from other people. And we see the list of everybody who's watching. And the one person who's not watching is the older lady who's at the slot machine, who, as soon as the auxiliary power came back on, she was back at her slots. Little known thing here. Apparently, when a blackout happens, slot machines, first thing to go back on. Wouldn't you know? And this one is back on enough. It's not all lit up, but it's lit up enough so that she can keep playing. So we cut back to surveillance, and apparently infrared is able to pick up Delinda, Nessa, and Sam. Now, this feels like a stretch to me. I have no idea how infrared works, but for infrared to be able to pick up distinct heat signatures of each person, that's sure the show has to happen. This show has to happen. So meanwhile, Mike is freaking out, And he's starting to ask questions about getting out of surveillance. And all communications are down. Switchboards outside are probably down. Everything is down. But Mike has a plan. He's asking about the emergency key to open up the locks. Ed is trying to calm Mike down, but it's not happening. Emergency generators aren't on, and the manual override key is with Danny, but Danny's not there. And there's only one manual override key for it. And they figure out that they can't find our boy Daniel. It's at this point that Mike confesses to Ed that he's claustrophobic. And it's not much of a confession because he's definitely freaking out. And he says,
Wait a minute, you're claustrophobic? Why you think I'm a valet?
So I thought it was because of the money and because he liked working with people, but apparently it's the claustrophobia. So Nessa and Delinda start going through this guy's stuff. Oh, this guy, by the way, was the guy that we saw in the suit earlier. He's the dead body guy. That actor's name is Ron Roget. He's best known for playing one of the captains in one of the Power Rangers shows. Specifically, Captain William Mitchell in Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue. He started his career in 91 on something called Prep Z. His last known credit is A Girl Like Him as Mr. Beckett in 2024. That's the dead guy. The girls are trying to figure out who he is.
Okay, I have way too much caffeine in my system to handle
So
this.
he's a Las Vegas native.
The Marcus card, man, had good taste.
Oh, his wife did.
No wedding ring.
Keep the no ring thing in mind. As Delinda and Nessa are super calm, Delinda reaches for Sam's cell phone and Delinda can't, or Sam can't figure out how these two are so calm.
Do you realize a man's been murdered and right in front of our face and you're acting like you see this every day? Unless the reason why you two are so calm is because the two of you had something to do with this.
I think you need to take a little nap.
I agree. Oh, you agree? Yeah. You guys think I should take a little nap? Yeah. Well, you would love for me to take a little nap, wouldn't you? Little nap like this dead guy, perhaps?
Sam is starting to get super paranoid. Remember, earlier on, she'd been up for 48 hours with the Resnick brothers. She had the caffeine pills and no sleep. She is tripping. And is hyperventilating, actually. So we cut back into the elevator, and Danny's trying to make small talk with the smiling guy, and he's checking in on the smiling guy and Mary. Mary's kind of about to lose it herself. She said she's starting to get into the conversation, and Danny says this isn't the time for it, and Mary is having none of that. Hey, dairy shippers, this is our time. This is the episode right here. This is the foundation of the dairy shipdom right here. This is the concrete foundation of it right here. She tells Danny,
We made love, Danny.
Mary, please.
and throughout all of this, you'll hear the cracks in Nikki Cox's voice. Through all of her scenes, you will hear the cracks. You will hear the emotion pouring out of this poor girl. They should have given the Comedy Emmy Award to Vanessa for this episode and the Dramatic Emmy Award to Mary for Nikki Cox for this episode. Is all I'm saying. They could have split it. They could have split it.
And you told me that you loved me.
And you told me that you loved me. And you told me that you loved me. Oh, Danny. Oh, Danny. So Mitch lets it slip that Danny's probably stuck in one of the elevators, and now Mike is completely and totally freaking out. To the point where he's trying to break through the door. It's not happening. Ed has to come over and smack the sense out of him. Or smack the sense into him. At least that's the intent.
Mike, that's a twin steel door. Mike,
Get out of here. I gotta get out of here, man. I gotta get out of here.
Hey,
Mr. D, you just hit me.
you were freaking out on me, man.
Well, now my face hurts, and I'm still freaking out. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
I'm still freaking out, thanks. So, listen, when Las Vegas fans talk about this episode, The Nights the Light Went Out in Vegas, they love to talk about Sam. They love to talk about Vanessa Marcel's performance in this episode. As they should, it's fantastic. And even the DVD commentary is linked with it because she's the one doing commentary with GST, and he talks about how he wrote the episode for her. However, Mike is in that same... Mike is doing exceptional work here. Exceptional comedic work is James LeJour in this episode. So much so, in the DVD commentary, it's still like Vanessa has to stop and she's watching James LeJour act up. It's fantastic. Not enough people talk about James in this episode. We should have t-shirts. It should be flying over sports arenas with a sign behind a biplane that says James LeJour's acting in the night the lights went out in Vegas was better than anything Tom Cruise has ever done. We should see that all the time. It should be on posters. It should be on the front of newspapers. Who reads newspapers anymore? But it should be all over the place that people know about James LeJour's acting in this particular episode of Las Vegas. So Mary is going to get her answers in this episode. She is determined. And there is no time like the present. She is locked in that elevator. She's going to get her answers. Did you say you loved me just to get me into bed? Oof! Every line that she gives is just a cut. And Danny says we're talking about 5 years ago. I didn't realize there was a statute of limitations, Mary says. So let's do some math. 5 years ago, as of the airing of this was 1999. It was originally supposed to be done in December of 03, which would have made it 1998. So we'll put the timeline in 1998/1999-ish for our Team Dairy here. By the way, this episode was actually shot in December of 2003, according to the Gary Scott Thompson commentary. And so this was around the time that this episode was shot. Josh, this is the first day of filming back from Josh's injury, actually. So scenes were shot out of order. Episodes were shot out of order. Obviously, that was brought up before. Episodes shot out of order. So even though Josh was shot a few episodes back, this was the first episode he came back and shot. I said shot a couple times. Take a shot every time you hear shot. So this is the first day back for Josh, was this episode. And I wonder, since this was the first day back for Josh in this episode, and he's, still on crutches and heartbreakers and Hellraisers and heartbreakers, and he goes off with Sam, and Mary does the line about, I heard that you're sleeping with Sam. So this was shot first for Josh coming back, but what was the what all was the play? How did this all get mapped out? Was this all mapped out beforehand, or was it added later? Since this was the first, like when they went back and they shot Hellraisers, did they add different elements of the Sam Danny thing, or did they add different elements where Mary was looking? What was the play out on that? That's an interesting. It had to have just been internal, right? Like they had to behind the scenes know what the layout essentially was supposed to be. Which I can't. Hats off to them for keeping track of that, because they're talking about multiple episodes shot all out of order, and not just the crew but the cast keeping track of all this. Amazing. Anyway, all these different rants. So Danny tells the story of how when he left for the Marines, he didn't know if he was going to come back to Vegas. So he just wanted to this is the thing. So he wanted to let Mary know how he felt at the time before he left, which almost to me makes it seem like he just kind of wanted a thing to come home to, a thing to fight for, a person to fight for, an entity, almost a talisman, almost something to hold on hope to come back to, but not necessarily being in love with Mary, which, by the way, isn't a completely alien thought process to people in the armed forces. You see a whole lot of strained and odd and broken marriages through that, in part because of that sort of sort of the kind of mentality that a lot of these guys have, or at least had, probably still have. It's probably still this time immemorial. It's probably the same type of thinking to guys who volunteer to go into the armed forces, who have this idea in their head, but don't know or haven't experienced or don't know the actual intricacies of the reality of the idea that they have in their head on a lot of different fronts. So Danny, while having this idea of Mary in his head, at the sound, we'll get into this. We'll get more. It's a lot. It's this Mary and Sam and Danny stuff is a lot. So Danny tells her that story, and then Mary comes back with the eyes. Mary comes back with,
So you do love me?
and Danny with the humana again, because aren't we used to Danny doing the humanas? We cut back to the casino, and everybody's off in like groups. We have like the wait staff, we have people at the tables, and everybody's just kind of off in their own group. Sam is off in her own head, and that's in part because that's what Vanessa did while preparing for this role. So as we see Sam start to break down, Vanessa talks about how she isolated herself from the other girls, which was hard for her because they liked each other so much that they would always be chatting, especially when the girls were on set. They would always be chatting, they would always be talking with each other, etc. So for her to have to break away to get into the mind space to do this was slightly difficult in that aspect. But apparently Gary Scott Thompson, and how he was with this episode, because he apparently was always on set for episodes that he wrote specifically, made sure to give Vanessa her space while still checking in on her. Made sure to not, because he was laughing through this entire breakdown, but he made sure to keep that internal, to give her space, but also check on her whenever she needed it. And apparently that helped, but that was Vanessa's mindset going into it, is her character is now separate from everybody in the casino. She has to be separate from everybody in the casino, at least while they're filming this. So this scene is fantastic between the three of the girls, as the old lady is playing the slot machines in the background. Vanessa, or Sam, is starting to break down entirely because she's wondering where Ed was. Ed is always around, except for this one time when he's not around. Delinda and Nessa they're just kind of just being normal while everything else around them is the most abnormal thing ever, which makes sense if you think about just who Ed is, the guy who raised them. In any event, Sam goes on this rant about it being a CIA-sanctioned hit and the casino being a CIA front because Ed is in charge of everything. He would be down there, of course. He's watching them right now. And why wouldn't he be? Because
he's the puppet master!
That was directed at Gary Scott Thompson. She, of course, called Gary Scott Thompson the puppet master, and so do we here. Friend of the show, Gary Scott Thompson, and so do we here at the Podecito. We cut back to surveillance, and Mike is plotting his escape. He's trying to figure out how to get down to the lobby and what that would entail.
Okay, the main air ducts lead to the central system. From there, I can take any branch and drop into the lobby. It's about a 20-plus foot drop, so I'll probably break my leg. Maybe both, but that's okay. This is good. This is a good plan. Somebody, give me a screwdriver.
So we cut to the elevator. So Mary's going to set the scene and talk about how her and Danny have been best friends, and then everything, they were each other's first everything, including kiss. 4th grade, behind the swings. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something right now. And this is probably a subconscious reason. I didn't even think about this until right now. This is probably a subconscious reason to why I tie so closely to Team Derry. Because Surreal 469, his first kiss Never forget that either. 3rd grade. On the swings, not behind it, on the swings with, I'll redact her name. She's married with children. She's not Peg Bundy, but I'll redact her name. But also same timeline, at least timeline in life. I'm very close. I didn't even think about that until right now. I'm right on the swings. 3rd grade for known the girl forever. Grew up together, born the same. Yeah. Yeah. So Danny remembers everything, including about the night that they slept together. But Mary's gonna set the scene, and she asks the guy what's his name, but he doesn't say anything. So he's just called Mr. Smiley Face. Now the reason why he doesn't say anything in the show, we'll get to later. The reason why he doesn't say anything in real life, and the reason why everybody else that's been on the show so far hasn't said anything so far, is because it's a bottle episode. You have to cut corners where you can, which is why there's only so many extras in this episode, and why none of them so far have spoken, because you have to pay the extras, and if the extras speak, you have to pay them extra. If the extras, you have to pay extra if the extras speak. If they speak, you have to pay the extras extra. Nobody's spoken so far, and this guy has a reason why he doesn't speak. He's Mr. Smiley Face Man. So Danny he can't believe what's happening. Listen, Danny, you've had this coming forever. So you sit there and you take it, Marine. Every time Mary wanted something else to happen, Danny was the one who didn't, because he was afraid it would ruin the relationship. And she says,
which is basically just guy talk for I'd rather be doing someone else.
Now this is where I disagree. That line is actually, basically, this is going to get me in trouble, but that's a chick line. That's a line that, in my experiences and in experiences with my boys and experience with other guys I know and have met, that's a line that women give to men when they, quote unquote, would rather be doing someone else. I don't want to ruin the friendship. That's not a line that guys typically use. That's a line that women typically use. But we'll let the show continue. And as soon as he hears that, Danny is panicking. He is trying. He wants to pry the door open if we can.
Hey! Excuse me.
Hey! Here we go back to surveillance, and we see the other guy in surveillance. He seems to be awake. He's in front of a monitor. There seems to be light in front of it. It almost looks like he's doing something. And he looks at them. He looks at Ed and Mitch, who look back at Mike. He doesn't look at Mike. But Mike comes back out and he's trying to execute his plan. He needs a screwdriver, damn it. Ask him, Mike.
Hey! So nobody in this whole damn room has got a screwdriver.
For the record, that part with Mike is Vanessa Marcil's favorite part of the episode. She loves that part of the episode. I can't say... Again, this is what I'm talking about. Everyone talks about Vanessa's performance. Great. More people need to talk about James's. My goodness. That's just tremendous. And people also forget, James came from sitcom backgrounds. Not only did James have his own successful sitcoms, moderately successful sitcom, For Your Love, not long before Las Vegas, but he also has a bit of a career doing guest work on other sitcoms for, at this point in Las Vegas, the 2003, well over a decade. He can hit his mark, he can hit the line, he can do it, and he does it exceptionally well, which is why James is one of my favorite actors. Duh, he can do this stuff.
Why don't you take a little break?
Yeah, that's a good idea. You gotta stretch the legs, wash the face, refocus.
There you go.
I assume you're interested in large amounts of money.
It's Vegas, who isn't?
If you like the podcast and you want to help support it, you can send a Cash App, join our Patreon or Subscribe Star, or buy us a coffee. Just search The Podecito on all those platforms. So then we get the reaction shot from Ed, and then we get the close-up shot from Vanessa. And these scenes right here are Gary Scott Thompson's favorite parts. In the DVD commentary, this is the part where Vanessa talks about Sam. And they talk about this scene and why they love, not just this scene, but this episode, and why they love this episode for Sam. Because Sam, her character, is so tough. And we talked about this, Hellraisers and Heartbreakers. Sam's character is usually so tough. So when we have these scenes, when we have these episodes where her guard has to come down for some external reason, they are fun for her to act in, or at least they were fun for Vanessa to act in, and they're fun for us, the viewer, who loves Sam and loves that tough exterior of her. Vanessa describes Sam as a boy in a girl's body, but she's in the boy in a girl's body as a front, like that tough exterior is a front. Because when it actually does come down, when we do get to see her sweetness underneath the barbed wire, we get to see her freak out. We get to see her fall in infatuation. We get to see her become softer around Josh. We later are going to get to see her way out of her element and knocked off her guard by somebody from her past. And that happens a couple of times, and especially with a character like this whose past isn't that well known. We talked about that with Ed in the last episode. The characters that have the shadow over them, the slow reveal of different elements of their character are just tremendous to watch. And I would imagine for Gary Scott Thompson, tremendous to write as well. So she's on her rant. She goes in on the CIA sanctioned hits.
Oh my God. When I remember buying this jacket, I would have found the killer, and I don't remember. If this is a CIA sanctioned hit, then that means that Ed could have brainwashed me into being the assassin. This is just like the Manchurian Candidate. Maybe I've killed before.
Nessa and Delinda say that maybe they should be treating not Vanessa. I want to say Vanessa because they want to be treating Sam for shock. Now, here's the thing about treating someone for shock. So, in order to treat somebody for shock, look this up. You need to have them lie down, keep still, loosen up any tight clothing that they may have on, and put a blanket on them so they don't get chills. None of that happens in this episode. They can't get Sam to sit down for anything. They can't get let alone to lay down. And they certainly can't get her to keep still. So all hope is lost on the treating her for shock. But that's okay because
We should probably be treating little Miss Paranoia for shock. Well, we can't do anything until the caffeine pills wear off.
editing surreal here. So as I'm doing this episode and I'm making a note about a line that Nessa says about Sam at this moment, I notice that's an alternate line everywhere else. In the original and streaming, after Delinda says they should be treating Sam for shock, Nessa says we have to wait until the caffeine pills wear off. On the DVD only, Nessa says, yeah, we should, but she's so much more interesting this way. It's only on the DVD. They edited it out of the original airing and the streaming. I don't know why. Maybe network standards and practices wanted something more reasonable as opposed to the joke about Sam being more interesting this way. Maybe they were afraid of lawsuits or something. I don't know. The network, it seems like network interference because the line was changed. But that's interesting to note. And Sam is just she's completely lost it. But we go to the act break or the commercial break with Delinda doing a recap. Yes, somebody in here is a murderer. And we see all the people looking at each other, except for the old lady at the slot machine. She's still looking at her slot machine. She doesn't care about anybody else. It's just her and her slot machine, baby. Meanwhile, Sam is off the deep end. We're still stuck on that one particular camera, and we saw the dead guy. And here's the thing about the dead guy. Apparently the problem with the dead guy underneath the sheet is that the guy from Power Rangers is apparently the shots a lot of the time had to be redone because he kept breathing under the sheet. He didn't hold his breath long enough for the shots to not have to be redone over and over again. So meanwhile, they're trying to figure out how to get some kind of power to the cameras for zoom or something. Right now, it's just a static basic image. And Mitch says that they need an engineer in there, and Ed says, okay, fine. So Mike's found a screwdriver, and he's opened up the vents, and he's found a screwdriver, and he's going to try to go into the vent to escape. Now, here's the thing. We'll get to this later. He's going to go into the vents to try to escape for his claustrophobia. At least he's going to try. Ed stops him and says that he needs an engineer, and he's the only engineer that he's got at the moment. So Danny at this point in the elevator has to sit down because Josh at this point in the elevator has to sit down. Luckily for the Smiley Man, he gets to lay down. We haven't mentioned the Smiley Man, have we? We should do that. So the Smiley Man is an actor named Christian Seaborn. Christian Seaborn only has a quite literal handful of credits on his IMDb. His first credit was on the show Alice in 1977 for one episode. It's the spinoff of the movie with Linda Lavin. It's a good show, but he was on that for one episode in 77. He did Angie with Donna Pascal in 79, WKRP in Cincinnati in 79 as well. Skip a couple of decades to this episode of Las Vegas, and his last credited role was in a movie with Tippi Hedren, Bronson Pinchot, Joan Van Ark, and Richard Mull, Diamond Zero, in 2005, just a year after this, as worker number one. That's Christian Seaborn, a.k.a. Little Smiling Man, is his credit in this episode. Little Smiling Man is smiling because he gets to kind of lean back and listen to the escapades of Mary and Danny. And Mary is talking about prom and the expectation of prom. And
So we go to prom together. Nothing happens, but of course I wanted something to happen. Oh God, I wanted something to happen. But, once again, whole friendship thing gets in the way.
And Danny is looking at her like she's crazy. You know she's not crazy, Danny. Danny's looking at her like, why is she saying all this? I'm sorry, is she making it up? I'm sorry, did not actually happen, Danny? Keep listening, young man. You know exactly what you did. Mary's talking about how beautiful the gown is and how Danny was the one who bought it for her. Meanwhile, Mr. Smiley Face, he went ahead and went to sleep listening to this. But she still has that prom dress. And Danny says that he looked beautiful in it. And Mary wanted Danny to take her. Mary wanted prom night to be the night. She wanted the whole magical thing. She wanted there are steps to this picket fenceness. And she wanted that night to be the night. It was Mary and Danny. And then she says Danny decided to flee Vegas. Danny says he joined the Marines. She said same thing. This is not the first time this came up. In no sense of the words, this is the first time this came up in the show. Remember the pilot? You walked out on us, Danny. Remember the pilot? When we needed you most. Remember the pilot? This is not the first time this came up. And I'm sure Danny, that was a whistle. I'm sure Danny did it again. I'm sure Danny didn't think, or yes he did. He ran away to join the circus. Joining the Marines is the teenage version of running away to join the circus. We'll keep going. I have a whole lot of thoughts, but we'll keep going. And Mary says, "You left me, Danny." And again, the look on his face, like, huh? Don't give her that look, Danny. Don't do it. I'm taking sides here. But anyway, Sam says that the slot machine lady has the eyes of a killer. We're trying to figure out who did what. And then the girls on the floor remember about the emergency walkie-talkies in the pit because they were trying to figure out ways of communication. And the way Ed had managed to get Mike to calm down was by mentioning that there's a killer on the floor with our girls. And so Mike has to man up and get the job done right now. He's got to focus, and he's got to actually try to help. We can cut back to the elevator, and Gary Scott Thompson in the commentary talks about how being trapped in the elevator here for Danny was a metaphor about guys who have to have the we need to talk conversations with the girl at some point. And we've all had to have that conversation. We've all had to have that conversation. No matter how it ended, we all had to have that conversation more than once. See, now Danny's going to give it to her. Now, or at least now Danny thinks he's going to give it to her. He says,
You want to know why I never went after you? Why I never let anything happen all those times you wanted to?
Yeah, I do.
Because I couldn't possibly live up to your expectations. You put me so high on a pedestal that if I ever fell off, I'd never hit the ground.
He couldn't reach her expectations. And Mary cuts to, here's an interesting thing. Mary cuts to,
Don't you dare try to play the performance anxiety card with me, Danny. It's beneath you. I was there the night we made love, remember? Believe me, you had no performance problems.
Mary cuts to that. Mary cuts to performance anxiety like in the bedroom. Danny's not talking about that. Danny's talking about life. Danny's talking about being the knight in shining armor forever. He's not talking about the 30 seconds in the bedroom. Is that too long? Is that too in the bedroom? He's not talking about the 15 seconds in the bed. That's about right. 15. He's not talking about that time. He's not talking about just that. He's talking about outside, doing everything. The mowing the lawn, the providing, the protecting for a wife and a family thing. That's what Danny's talking about. Mary, for some reason, cuts to performance in bed. I know that's not what Danny's talking about. And I would imagine that Mary should know that that's not what he's talking about, but she might be freaking out a little bit as well. But Mary cuts to the core of the issue. All the looking at Mary like, what are you talking about? We've seen this. She says,
I see the way you look at me. You're always telling me what I can and can't do. If I'm with another guy, you get jealous when I kiss you. You kiss me back. What exactly do you mean?
I don't...
And then she says, what exactly does that mean? And he comes back with the humana. When she kisses you, Daniel Tiberius McCoy, you kiss her back. What does that mean? In the hallway, how many episodes ago it was when Big Ed was out of town, Semper Spy? That was Semper Spy, right? That was episode 6, so we're 7 episodes away. 7 episodes ago, almost 2 months ago. He didn't stop her. He didn't try to stop her. The way, the looks, the humanas, tennis break, all of it. It's all been leading to this. We'll keep going. We'll keep going. Nessa and Delinda have found the walkie-talkies, and they're talking with Ed in surveillance, and they're joking about Mike and his claustrophobia. And this is a cool line right here from Mike as he's on the systems trying to get it to work again. He said,
I'm definitely calling the NAACP, holding a brother against his will.
And Nessa and Delinda are feeding back the information on the victim to Ed. And they say down to he doesn't have a wedding ring. And Ed chimes in with, no ring doesn't mean he's not married. That's true. It doesn't. Back to the elevator we go. Danny asks if she's been waiting 5 years to cut into him. And that's exactly what she has been waiting for. And here Danny comes with a good line of questioning. To Danny's credit, I can't just sit here and beat up on poor Daniel Methuselah McCoy. He asks what she expected. What exactly do you expect? This is a great line of questioning. This is not just for this. I think this is a great line of questioning that I think more people should ask themselves in more aspects of their lives. I've found myself asking this question to people, whether in real life or by watching what they've done or hearing stories about people and stuff like that. Like, what exactly did you expect? How did you expect this to end? What was the end goal? How did you think this was going to play out? Danny asked that about Mary. How did she think it was going to play out? And she basically lays out the picket fence line, the picket fence story.
What exactly did you expect to happen?
I thought we'd end up together.
You mean married?
Yeah, white picket fence, kids, dogs, swimming pool, whole 9 yards.
The whole fairy tale. How long has she been feeling like this?
How long have you felt like this?
Since 4th grade. When he kissed me behind the swings.
Since the 4th grade. Behind the swings. Oh my goodness. That whole time. Since that kiss. Since that kiss. It's in his kiss. That's where it is. And then he kissed me. All those songs rolled into more. I'm sure there's more songs about kissing. And at the moment of a kiss. Kiss from a Rose, whatever. All the Kiss, the catalog of the band Kiss. Prince's Kiss. Hershey's Kiss. Kiss FM. Since that kiss. 4th grade, behind the swings. Mary's had that dream about Daniel McCoy. Then, just when I'm about to try to give Danny credit, just when I want to not beat up on Danny the entire episode, he says,
Now what?
We can still be friends.
oh my God. We've talked. Just, you know what? Don't even open the elevator. Just cut the cable. Just cut the cable right now. Just let it plummet. Don't even open it. Don't even open it. Just cut the cable, let it plummet, and then just bury it in. Just don't. You might just put a headstone on top of that. Just don't even continue. We can still beat Danny. And we talk about facial expressions on this show. On this episode in particular. We're going to see more from Vanessa. We saw some good ones from James. We've talked about it in the past, her acting. But Nikki, you can see Nikki's heart, Mary's heart, disintegrating in the wind on Nikki's face as he says that. You know the look she's got on her face? She got the same look on her face that she had when she got stopped when they were going to go check on Greg in the morgue. When she finally stops fighting Danny, that same faraway look on her face, she's got that look of loss, of death. She's got that look on her face, and Danny sighs like he didn't know what he just did. Like he didn't know did you not know what you just did? Oh, I feel so bad for doing the thing that I knew I was going to do when I said it. Just when I gave you credit. Anyway, I'm getting so frustrated with this boy. So Nessa and Delinda are chatting with Ed on the walkie-talkie, and they reveal to Ed that Sam is going a little bit off the deep end. She's more than a little bit off the deep end. And she is over there in the corner. She's talking about how
they're all probably in on this together. Which means I'm the only innocent one. It means they have to kill me too.
Hey.
And now she comes back and she meets them, and the paranoia is all over her face. And she turns to run away, and she knocks over the trash can that had the gun in it. And we have our murder weapon. So then we cut back to surveillance, and we cut back to the floor, and we get another pan of the people on the floor before we go to commercial again. But wait, it doesn't just stop at the same people that it panned to before. It goes, we whoosh from the dead body backwards, which is another cool. We haven't been talking enough about some of the cool whooshes that we've seen in this episode. There are a lot of cool whooshes in this episode. They've made great work of the whoosh mechanic on this episode. Probably better than they have other episodes. They started playing around with it in the last episode with the horse gallop. They've got some great ones on this one, including this backwards whoosh through a door, window, something, and we hear heavy breathing. Who does that belong to? The killer? We come back and we redo that the opposite way, the whoosh. The heavy breathing, we cut back onto the floor to the dead body, the gun, and then we whoosh back up to surveillance. Mike is able to get another cam going by rerouting auxiliary power. I had to look it up. Apparently it is a thing you can do. It's not the greatest, you don't always get the greatest quality, but it is in fact a thing you can do. It's not just a thing Star Trek made up. In the meanwhile, Ed has the girls lock the gun up and try to get people over to the north side of the casino, because that's where the other cam is, and we can kind of get a good look at everybody. Now, meanwhile, nobody can leave the casino because all the doors are electronic, which is a fire hazard. Like, it's obviously a hazard. You can't actually do that. But again, the show has to continue, you see. And then here we get one of the greatest moments of the episode, as Delinda is trying to get the lady in the slot machine over to the north side of the casino. The lady in the slot machine just cuts a look at Delinda and goes back to playing her slot machine.
Excuse me, we need you to move to the north end of the casino, please.
Tremendous work. Give her the Emmy. Tremendous work. Cut back to the elevator, and Mary is full on crying in her lap as we reveal that Danny was her knight in shining armor, and that's why she expected to marry him. And here Danny is trying to stand on that line that he said earlier, that he could never live up to her expectations for being the knight in shining armor, right? But then she comes back with a counter argument about how he saved her from her father. And we heard about this before. This, again, is not anything particularly new. This was hinted at very early on in the pilot, I think. Was hinted at very early on, the tragedy with Mary and her father and all other stuff, and how all that played out, and how that possibly, I'm guessing probably. I haven't talked to GST, friend of the show, GST. I would like to. I haven't talked to. I'd like to, because I'd like to kind of piece together what I would talk to him about, and all this other stuff first before I reach out to him. But I would bet, just an educated guess just from watching this as much as I have, that fed into the original play for Mary to be a prostitute or a hooker on the Vegas Strip with a heart of gold, and then they changed her from that to director of special events, whatever it was, right? I'm guessing that that's how that played out. But because Danny saved her from her father by beating the crap out of him, he never touched her again. So that, I think, feeds into an idea that Gary Scott Thompson talks about this on the DVD commentary when he says, because Vanessa asks about her marrying the white picket fence and all that. And Gary says it's because she never had it. Because her backstory is so broken that she's looking for it, or she was looking for it, and she found it in Danny. And Vanessa retorts with, I never had it, and I don't look for it. Thank you, Vanessa. But the story of Mary is that's why. But I think, and that's a simplistic way of putting it, because again, this is Hollywood and this is TV. And it works. Many times it works. I think this is also a trauma response. I think this is also a response from her attachment to Danny is also part of that trauma response. Because she was in that situation, he saved her from that situation, and the attachment goes from entirely negative to entirely positive to this other person, and the savior, and I'm sure there's many other names for it, savior complex, victim, not necessarily victim complex, but being saved, 99, all that stuff. I'm sure there's a whole section in the diagnostic book about that, but I'm sure, but tying that to that, I think that they go hand in hand. Gary Scott Thompson also said at this point of the series with the show and with Mary and Danny, first off, this storyline lit up the message boards. At the time that it happened. Now, I wasn't a fan yet at the time that it happened. Again, I became a fan after I got the season 1 DVD already, so I was a bit behind. But the message boards apparently lit up. I'm sure they did, because they lit up for years after this. They lit up for years past the time the show was off the air. People were still talking about Mary and Danny. The men who responded back then at the time, according to GST, were solidly on Danny's side. And the women at the time were solidly on Mary's side. I don't know what this is about me. I was solidly on Mary's side. First time I saw this on the DVD, I was like, man, if you don't, that girl, man, if you don't, cause, and I still am. I'm trying to give Danny as much room as possible, but he's not making it easy. We cut back to surveillance, and Michael is able to get Zoom, is Mr. Cannon, and Ed asks him to whip up a gun residue test. Now, this is the thing. This is part of some of the silliness of the show. Yes, I know Mike is an engineer, and I know he's very smart, and he was able to reroute auxiliary power. Ed's asking a lot. Ed is asking a lot of a man who is in the middle of a panic attack, trying to figure out how to reroute auxiliary power and cook up gun residue tests, etc. But Mike is able to do it because he's Mike Cannon. In the zoom in, we get to see the lovely Delinda Deline as she is asked by her father to go to Mystique and get a black light. On her way there, we see Sam in the corner, and we see GST's favorite shot of this episode, the zoom to Delinda and then zoom around her as she continues her walk to Mystique. And we get that long, far away shot of the spotlight behind her. It's a very nice artistic shot. Good job by Mr. Zisk. But it was also a shot built on necessity because they hadn't had the rest of the casino built yet. So her walking through there wasn't entirely practical. So they had to figure out a creative way around it. See, that comes back to the creative way around a set of rules or regulations or obstacles. Delinda is on her way into Mystique to try to find a black light. And we hear the heavy breathing again. In Mystique, Delinda is looking for the black light, and she hears a noise, and she calls out to what I assume she thinks are a couple of waitresses, Danica and Kylie. Now, mind you, we haven't seen Danica, we haven't seen Kylie, so if they were they supposed to be there? If they were supposed to be there, how come we hadn't heard from them at all? How come we hadn't heard from any of the other people who should be working in this giant casino? Don't worry about that. Don't you worry about that at all. But Danica and Kylie, like I mentioned, were Gary Scott Thompson's nieces, since he had already mentioned his nephews. And Delinda is calling around because she hears a noise, maybe even breathing. Hold on a second. Let's get a new deck in here, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Rainy Days Don't Get Me Down by Anthony Njoku. If you like what you're hearing, want to hear it again, hear more, or both, just go to tinyurl.com/anjoku. That's tinyurl.com/anjoku. Mary and Danny realize that there's still no power back on left yet, and it's been entirely too long since the power's been cut on, and look at the look that they give each other. But we cut to Sam completely freaking out. She is entirely freaking out. She's rambling again. This scene right here, as she's freaking out by herself, this is the first scene that Vanessa actually shot for this particular episode. She is entirely losing it. We're seeing a couple of different degrees of Sam losing it. These are all fun. I would like even a supercut of these if somebody could have done that, or because you still can do that. Premiere, or whatever. Wondershare, get Wondershare. You can do it yourself. But the Sam freaking out is amazing, and Nessa is trying to say maybe you should lie down, and Sam doesn't trust her.
Hey, are you okay, Sam?
Yeah. I'm fine.
Maybe you should lie down and get some sleep.
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Are you sure?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay, see you later. Maybe you should lie down and get some sleep. Never trusted her in that English accent. That's not her accent.
That's just a great reading of the lines. And so Delinda is walking around with the black light, this large black light that she's almost walking with it like it's a bow staff, almost like Donatello from the Ninja Turtles. It's even purple. But she is definitely not enjoying what's happening. She gets grabbed by the shoulders by what seems to be gloves or something, and it freaks her out, and she drops the black light. Cut to the elevator. Smiley Man is snoring away. Danny is looking at Mary. Mary's looking at Danny. And Danny, Daniel Bartholomew McCoy, scoots over, purposefully scoots over, and leans in to kiss Mary. He did it on purpose. Come on. Come on. And of course, Mary kisses him back, and we cut back to surveillance. And Ed is wondering what's taking so long with the black light. So he sends Nessa to go check for Delinda. In the meantime, Nessa leaves Sam with the walkie-talkie to talk to Ed. And at this point, Sam said she didn't even want to. She almost seemed like the walkie-talkie at this point might even be the killer. And she talks about how she doesn't trust the girls.
Talk to Ed. Ed's the mastermind behind this whole thing. And Nessa and Delinda are his evil little minions. See, I never trusted those supermodel bitches. They've been planning this for weeks. Once.
It's amazing. Vanessa is doing. I can't take anything away from Vanessa. She's still doing amazing work. And Mike has calmed down right now, but keep that in mind right now. We're not done with Mike, but Sam is just off the page right now. She is completely and totally lost it. Can she play a schizophrenic, paranoid freak? Apparently. We cut back to the elevator, and Mary and Danny are snogging. They are snogging for our friends across the pond. Nessa comes in, and she's looking for Delinda. She doesn't see Delinda. She walks over the broken black light, so something must have happened. Now Nessa is definitely scared. She's looking around. She's looking through the very slow walk. She looks over a bar, and she gets scared at what she sees over the bar. Now, this was actually real. Marsha Thomason was actually scared by the guy that was on the other side of the bar and got a real scream out of her. Ed asks Mike where does the air ducts lead. Mike says that the vent system doesn't lead to anywhere. It's a closed-in system. Now, the last episode, we saw Ed and Nessa sneak into the vault from the floor. The vault can't be connected to surveillance, can it? So maybe the vault is on a floor lower. It's slightly detached from the surveillance ventilation system. But why would the surveillance ventilation system be different? Especially in the last episode when the money was walking past surveillance, probably to get back down to the vault. Don't overthink it. Okay. So Sam is freaking out with the walkie-talkie, And she is told by Ed to go check on the girls in Mystique. Well, she doesn't want to do it. She realizes to herself that it's a trap, that Ed is sending her to her demise. Well, she's not going to just go to her demise. She thinks that she knows it's a setup, and she goes and she grabs the gun from the lockbox in the pit. And this is a spot where Vanessa Marcil said that she decided and she was going to act it out as if Sam was terrified of guns, but was going to use it anyway. She grabbed it anyway. She was terrified of it, but she was about to die, in her head. So she grabs it anyway. There's nothing Ed can do to stop her. Mike is just sitting there watching. Sam has the gun in her head and shaking it as if trying to get it loose from her hands while still gripping it when she walks into Mystique, completely and totally terrified, looking for Delinda and or Nessa with this gun in her hand. Is she going to kill the other queens of the Montecito? She feels the glass crunching underneath her feet, and she fires the gun at whatever she hears the noise at. So we cut back from commercial break. Some of the lights are back on in Vegas. Some aren't. Some aren't on completely. Ed can't get a hold of the girls. Mike, I think, maybe has a plan, but nobody's picking up the Nextel. In the heart of that, we cut back to the elevator. Danny and Mary making out again. And Danny is asked by Mary, tell me you don't feel something right now. Oh, I'm sure he does. He's a virile young man. I'm sure he does. But Danny tells Mary that he's not ready for the white picket fence thing right now. That is one of the more salient points that I think Danny has made. I completely understand it. I get it. You're young, in your 20s, you're probably not ready for that. You're a young man in your 20s, you're probably not ready for that. Your biological clock don't start ticking that early, generally speaking. You're on a different window than women are. Than women are. In your 20s, in Vegas, with a hotshot job, and looking like that, and again, with all, you have to remember, Daniel McCoy is the sexiest man in all of sexiest men, in the sexiest land of all the sexiest lands in all the land. Women throwing themselves at him. Swizzle stick ladies throwing themselves at him. He's got his pick. He doesn't necessarily need to be monogamous with one at the moment, if at all. He's not ready for that. He's still young. He's still trying to feel his wild oats, so to speak. Best argument so far. But Mary says that's a cop-out and you know it. Danny then tells her that when he left for the Marines, the only thing he took with him was a picture of her. Again, this goes back to what I was talking about. A lot of people in the armed forces tend to do stuff like that. Mary asked him straight out, how's that supposed to make her feel? That's supposed to make her feel better about what happened? And again, Danny with the humana-humanas. But then Mary comes in with the idea that it's not his phobia about getting with Mary has more to do with his mom.
I think you're afraid to commit because of what happened to your mother.
My mother died when I was just a kid. That has nothing to do with this.
You saw what losing her did to your father, and you're afraid that same thing is going to happen to you if you get too close to someone. And it's not just me, Danny. Any woman. It's one of the reasons you ran off and joined the Marines, isn't it? It's because we were living under the same roof and getting too close.
Mary says she was getting too close, and he couldn't handle it. And that is another salient point by Mary. Danny has some decent points too, but Mary's got some, argument for argument, Mary's got maybe some better points. And then Danny asks, why can't things just stay the same? If that isn't indicative of the maturity level that Danny's at the place where Danny is in his life when it comes to all this stuff, he's at a crossroads. Why can't things stay? Also, if you want to talk about lines that guys say, I don't know if we say it, but we at least think it. Maybe we say it. We say it to girls. I've said it to girls. Some variant I've said it to girls. Where it's like, well, we're good now. Why do we have to change it what we are? This is great. Why can't we stay here? This is fantastic. Let's just keep doing this. That's a guy line. That's guy code. It's not even a code. It's not code. It's plain English. We're telling you. Yeah, I like this arrangement. Let's keep this arrangement. I don't want to move from this arrangement. This arrangement is great until it's not. So we cut back into surveillance. Mike has a plan where he figures if they could cut into the main ducting system for the whole casino with something like a laser, they could actually cut through the duct system from surveillance to the main system. And Ed just happens to have a laser on him. Now, Ed, this was years before all those ads you see on. I don't know if you see them on YouTube because I have YouTube Premium, but ads you see on stuff like Rumble. If you're watching this on Rumble, thank you. Like, share, subscribe, follow, all that stuff. But if you're on Rumble and you see some of the ads that you'll see is, flashlight companies don't want you to have this flashlight, but there's nothing they can do about it. And they show footage of this flashlight that's so powerful it's cutting through metal and stuff. Ed apparently years before had his own personal laser. And I'm not talking about the laser eye pointers, but the laser pointers that we all had. I had a bunch. But with the different screens on them, so it would show different shapes. Anyway, I had a couple of those, and they were great. Anyway, Nessa and Delinda are behind the bar, and they're talking about the instances that brought them to them hiding behind the bar from a manic Sam. And Sam, they figure, has passed out from the kickback of the gun, and they're sitting there with the guy who wants to talk to the head alien in charge, Area 51 Man. Area 51 Man is a guy by the name of Matthew Frauman. Matthew Frauman has a couple of dozen credits to his name. His first credit was in 1999 in a movie with Christina Ricci and Robert Wagner and Timothy Oliphant called No Vacancy as cartoon commentator. He then, a few years later, did Las Vegas, of course. His last credited roles were as the coach's sidekick in 2008's Ninja Cheerleaders, and last credited role total was on a video game, L.A. Noire, as Herbert Chapman. I actually have that game. I've never played it, but I have it. In 2011, that's Matthew Frauman, Area 51 Man. Area 51 Man is the only extra who gets to say something. And he says,
"The lights go out, and then they come. They always come."
That's his line. He got to say it. I'm sure that upped his SAG registration for the year. In the meantime, Nessa's worried that he's the killer, except he can't be because of his hands. What happened to his hands? You don't want to know, which is shorthand, which is writer code for we don't want to tell you, or we can't think of anything clever or good to figure out what's wrong with his hands. We just did this so that you eliminate him as a suspect. We did. We eliminated him as a suspect. He's gone. And we cut to Ed and Mike in a vent. Remember when I talked about how Mike was going to try to disappear from the surveillance room through the vents? Well, guess what? Vents are smaller than rooms. Yeah. So aside from the fact that vents are nowhere near as clean as they look on television, this one looks pristine, like it was just waxed and polished that day. They're not. They're full of dust and stuff and critters and stuff. And the reason why they are is because there's no yearly cleaning of the vents like that. The housekeeping isn't up in the vents with a dust buster clearing it out. It just kind of stays there until something is wrong with the vents and they have to replace it and or clean it. And even then, they probably just clean around the area that they're replacing and they keep it moving, if they do that much. For the benefits of television, though, these vents are pristine, but they're also smaller than the room Mike was in. So Mike's claustrophobia just got worse.
It's kind of like commando school, Mike.
Yeah? I never went to commando school. I went to engineering school. And believe me, this is nothing like engineering school.
Oh, you don't know what you were missing.
Yes, I do.
So Ed's starting to cut through the vents. Meanwhile, Nessa and Delinda are standing over the poor passed out Sam from the kickback. As Ed is cutting through, first off, the CGI is actually fairly decent as long as you're not looking too closely at it on an HD screen. He cuts through the vent and he comes out. Everybody's calm. Ed and Linda and Nessa, again, the adventures that CIA family has had already, none of this shakes them at all, is amazing. Meanwhile, Mike is freaking out so much in the vent that he can't see that he can just step out. He's like, don't leave me here. Who's leaving you there? You can just walk out. And he does, and power comes back on, and we get to see surveillance come back up, and the elevator comes back up. Power's about to come back on to the entire casino. Elevator kicks back up. Mitch is brought down from surveillance with a kit. As the elevator comes back up, Danny tells Mary, you're right, I am afraid. Because Mary's been the one consistent female presence in his life, and Mary has to tell him.
But you're not your father, Danny. And I'm not your mother.
And then we get the best unspoken line from one of our spoken characters. Or unspoken line from our unspoken character, Mr. Smiley Man. Mr. Smiley Man, with a foreign translator, hands it to Danny and says the line that I have been thinking since I saw the damn pilot all those years ago.
What does it say?
It says, for God's sakes, marry her already.
Yeah. And the look that Mary gives to Danny, her eyes track his face as it moves. And the look on her face is like, yeah, stupid. Like, yeah. Marry me already. Yes. So Sam wakes up, which is weird to me because even with the caffeine pills, once you go down, you should be down for a while. But Sam is back up pretty quick, but now she's back up with no memory. She hit her head on the way down, and I would think Sam would just be out at this point. But we see Area 50, she doesn't know what's happened. She doesn't remember the gun. She doesn't remember being in Mystique. She didn't meet Mr. Area 51 man. We're all going to meet on the floor. As we do, as security comes out. By the way, where was the other bit of security? There's other security guys that we see in this episode. Where the hell were they this whole time? But okay. Security comes out with Mitch, and everybody hits the floor. And as this happens, we see Mike. As you look closely at Mike, as he's passing on the casino floor when Ed tells Ruben to hide the gun, Mike is breathing deeply the open air that's around him. So the whole crew hits the floor, and we get the blacklight test, and Sam gets the gun residue on her hands, and that's clearly a CG trick. Like that, it's floating a little bit. That's clearly a CG trick. And Ed does the blacklight test on all the guests, and they see that people don't have it, and the blonde lady who winked at Danny, she starts to try to make a run for it. But there's nowhere to go. Ed comes straight to her, finds out the gun residue, and has her put in holding until they can get Metro in there.
Kind of piss you off, did he?
It's a great line. Meanwhile, we later cut to Belisara, and we see the blonde lady who got arrested. She does her perp walk past Belisara. Crossing the other side is the corpse of her dead husband as he gets carted away in the Belisara. And Ed is giving a statement to Metro detectives, it looks like. So we get a couple other extras. Again, no one else is talking. So we get maybe about a dozen or so extras in this episode. Some we see later than others. The entire gang is sitting there in Belisara enjoying their time together. And apparently all of them love the group scenes. According to Vanessa Marcel, they all get very excited for them. And it's because they spent all that time in Vegas shooting the pilot. So when they got back in town in LA or maybe it was in New York, for the network party, there was a big network party for the season. All the other shows were talking with other executives and stuff. The Las Vegas crew was over in the corner. They were talking with themselves, and they ended up ditching early and going to get dinner and drinks and getting drunk with each other early from the party. Meanwhile, all the other shows were jealous that they had that camaraderie, that they were like, let's ditch this place. Let's go and do our own thing. And they did, and they had a ball, and that's fantastic. And that feeds into the camaraderie that you see on screen whenever they're together. It's fantastic. So we get the recap here at the Bellicera. Ed runs down the idea that the woman shot her husband because he cheated on her.
So she got all dressed up just to kill him. Damn.
Don't cheat on your wife.
Linda, I'm not even married.
Whatever.
See, this was a double thing. So it was one of those whatever things, but it was also a confirmation that Mike is single. It was a complete and total confirmation that Mike... I don't think at this point Mike had any romantic interactions with women yet on this show. He hadn't flirted with a chick or anything like that, had a serious love interest yet, or even casual love interest yet on the show, I don't think. Well, I guess he'd been seen with the women going in and out of the clubs, right? Coming in and out of Mystique a few times. I said that to say what they were doing was they were confirming that the mirage that you saw in the pilot of Mike having a wife and kids at his house by the pool, that was strictly a mirage. Those were not his wife and kids. Canonically, sister and I don't know if they brought up siblings. Canonically, they were not his wife and kids and robot. They were not. Maybe he still has the robot. So Ed is ready to leave. It's been a long night, and they recap what happened, where everybody was, Mike's claustrophobia issue, and we see some. Before we do that, we see some streakers hit the airwaves. Now the streakers, I was able to find something on a streaker. One of them actually claimed this on his IMDb. I don't know which one it was, but one of them actually claimed it. Rich Francher, since you claim it on your IMDb, here you go. This was his first credit. Rich Francher. This was his first credit as a streaker for one episode. He's got 4 credits. His last one was in 2015 in Synergy as Glenn. Synergy was a short. Before that, he was in That 70s Show as a groomsman, uncredited, in 2005. That's one of the streakers. Ed is going to sleep. He has had it with this day. Nessa runs down that Sam tried to shoot them. Meanwhile, Sam is knocked out at Bellicera. And if you look closely at Sam as she's knocked out on the table, if you look super closely, you can see she's drooling on the table. You can see she's drooling. They recap and they talk about Mike and his claustrophobia, and Nessa does an impersonation of him. Delinda's a little bit more Carrie, but Nessa cuts into him with the "I gotta get out of here." It's terrific.
Little, that's not what I heard. I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here.
But then Mike, in a stroke of genius, adjusts the focus away from himself to Danny and Mary. What were you two doing in that elevator that whole time? We hadn't heard from you. Danny says nothing. Nothing really happened. We just hung around. And we zoom in on the two of them looking at each other, and Mary looking at him like he is the love of her life, and they hold hands, and it's amazing. And all the lights are back on in Vegas, almost, except for one. It's the Luxor light, and it comes back on as an animal howls in the distance. As that happens, we hear the last musical cue of the episode. Again, it's a repeat. If you're watching the original, how'd you get the original? Don't ask me. It's Tom Jones' Fly Me to the Moon. Also on the DVD version. So the DVD version replaces the song that they had at the beginning with the Tom Jones version of Fly Me to the Moon. So was it it had to have been, you know what? It had to have been a per play thing. That had to be the reason why on the DVDs, the first episode of each season is the one that has little less conversation on it, and every other episode has Let It Ride. Which, again, I love Let It Ride. In some ways more than little less conversation. But that has to be the reason why that happened. And did they do that again with the Tom Jones Fly Me to the Moon? And they just kept it this time? So on the DVD version, it's the same Fly Me to the Moon as the Tom Jones as the original. On Peacock and Amazon, again, it has to be an AI song. It's easy to fall in love. It's easy to fall in love under the glow, or under the moonlight glow. It's got to be AI. It's got to be a fake Frank Sinatra AI. You know, like how you hear that fake, quote-unquote, Morgan Freeman AI on a whole bunch of cheap commercials. They don't want you to know about that. They know that stupid. Yeah, it sounds cheap. It's if it's written by an actual person, please reach out and extract my apologies from me. But until then, it sounds cheap. This episode was not based on, but was serendipitous because Easter weekend of that year, 2004, at the Bellagio, their power went out. They had a power outage for 3.5 days. They had to vacate 3,000 rooms because of it. So it's not something that can't happen. Before that, they were told, oh, that can't happen. That'll never happen. It happened to the Bellagio. That same year, a couple months later, a couple months after this aired, it happened to the Bellagio for 3.5 days. Out. On Easter weekend, too. That's a holiday weekend. That was the night the lights went out in Vegas. That's a terrific episode. That's a tour. Everyone in the Vegas community thinks that is a tour de force for Vanessa Marcil, and it is. It's also a tour de force for James LeJour. It's a tour de force for Nikki Cox. You know, Josh Duhamel is doing some good stammery work, doing some great deer in the headlights work, hominas. You know, it's fantastic. It's great. It's great. It's a great episode. And we get so much character development. We get so much of the history of Mary and Danny. We get so much of an insight into Sam's psyche. We do get background and insight into the psyche of Mike Cannon. So we get more of an open performance from Mitch. There was that one random guy who was in surveillance who didn't do anything at all. He should have been fired. This is a tremendous episode. It's one of my favorites. It's one of a lot of people's favorites. I want to know from you, is it one of your favorites? You need to tell me if it's one of your favorites. If you're watching this on Rumble, you can tell me in the comments. If you're listening to this on one of the podcast apps, I'm sure there are comments, there are reviews you can leave. You can do all that, and you can leave it there. And if there's not, you can find the Podecito on Twitter is the best place. We're also on Reddit in the Las Vegas TV show group on Reddit, and on Facebook, Las Vegas TV show or the series group there as well. You can let us know there and on Facebook, all the places. There's a link tree somewhere in the description of this episode. I can't say enough good things about Vanessa Marcil. I can't say enough good things about the creativity of this episode. And I can't say enough good things about James LeJour in particular. And I can't not point my finger at Danny McCoy. Danny, you better do right by our girl Mary. She loves you. And the D&D shippers, I know this is a bad episode for you. I know it is. I know it is. I know it is. I know it is, because this is so many deep cuts on that Danny and Mary relationship. This is such a foundation for that. I know it hurts, D&D shippers. I know it hurts, but let this episode be what it is for the dairy shippers, because this is dairy shipper fantasy land at this point. So that was episode 13, the night the lights went out in Vegas. Next week, we have Things That Go Jump in the Night. That episode is the John Lovitz episode. The John Lovitz debut episode. That's a great episode. I've got some stories for that as well. In the meantime, thank you for joining me on this journey. And if there's anything else I can ask you to do, is to share this episode and this show with as many people as possible, just so you will know, and your children will someday know, that this is the night the lights went out in Vegas. To paraphrase one Julia Sugar Baker from Designing Women. In the meantime, in between time, thank you for indulging me. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And until next time, as always, please take care.